Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We begin as always in the name of Allah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We begin in the name of Allah and send His peace and blessings upon the beloved messenger, his family, his companions, his followers until the day of judgment. And we ask that Allah makes us all amongst that following. I want to thank everyone who's tuning in and watching this live and whoever watches it recorded after for taking the time out to listen to this very important program. If you saw the flyer, it said for this program, what happens after the ballot, with a picture of the great martyr and the great blessing for the Muslim Ummah, Malcolm X. And as we know, today is the 20th, and tomorrow marks the anniversary of his assassination, his martyrdom, which occurred in 1965. And as we know, he was one of the early faces of Islam in America, and he made it a point to make sure that the Muslim community and the African American community was engaged civically and politically and engaged in social justice. So for that, we have this wonderful program where we're going to be featuring a number of excellent speakers. So first, we're going to invite the brother Dr. Abdul Musa, who is the president of one of the organizations that's partnering in this program, which is the Southeast Queens Muslim Collective. He's the president of that organization, which is based in Queens, New York. And previously, he worked with ICNA Relief as well as the Message magazine. He holds a doctorate degree in pastoral counseling from an Islamic perspective. So with that, I invite Dr. Abdul Musa to share a few words as we begin this program.
Can you unmute your mic? Dr. Abdul, you need to unmute your mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. We thank you for each and every one of you that have joined this momentous presentation on what happens after the ballot, where we have two dynamite speakers, keynote speakers who will be addressing this issue. The Southeast Queens Muslim Collective is an organization that was established to foster civic engagement, dialogue, and collaboration, and encourage civic engagement. We came up with this initiative to enhance, enlighten our community in regarding what was happening more than 50 years ago is still happening now. And what are we going to do about it? We are thankful that in the spirit of our tradition, that we have come together in a collaborative effort of different organizations to assist in making this effort a success. I thank you. I welcome you. I pray that each and every one of you have a pen and paper to take down your notes and give some evoking questions at the end of the presentation so that we can have some real serious dialogue about what our next steps will be. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Musa. May Allah reward you. We're going to kick things off with our first speaker, Imam Khalid Griggs, who is the Executive Director of Social Justice and Civic Engagement for ICNA, the Islamic Circle of North America. The department of ICNA, which is hosting this program, joining with the various organizations and collaborating for this program, is the ICNA Council for Social Justice, or ICNA CSJ. Imam Khalid Griggs was instrumental in the establishing of this department, and he heads a number of initiatives. He is in addition to his national tasks and national image, he is the founder and imam of the community mosque of Winston-Salem in his hometown of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So he's engaged in national work, but he's still grounded in the grassroots back in his home. And he is an extremely qualified speaker for this particular topic. He's been involved in civic engagement and social justice since his teenage years, right on the heels of the civil rights movement that led him to Islam. And with that, he has been an avid da'i, social justice advocate, working in grassroots civic engagement, prison reform, educational reform, particularly where that intersects with the criminal justice system, and just civic engagement on a local level, on a national level. Mashallah, he does it all. He's very versatile. So with that, I'm going to invite Imam Khalid to share some words with us. You're muted, Imam Khalid.
You would think after a while I would realize that you have to unmute yourself before anyone can hear you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, is his last messenger. After that introduction, Brother Musab, I have to say that your check is in the mail. You know, alhamdulillah. It was a very generous and overstated based on the humble and little efforts that I have put in the area of social justice. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward the sponsoring groups, and I pray that something that is said today will motivate or inspire us to make a commitment for social justice in this land. Now, my discussion, brief discussion, centers around the methodology and the actions of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X. As without saying and trying to convince anyone, Malcolm is probably one of the most admired, if not the most admired individual to come from the Black freedom struggle, the modern 20th century Black freedom struggle. Malcolm is an individual that when we look at his life, we see that he was a person who was constantly evolving, that at no point in his life did he demonstrate that he was satisfied with what he was able to do at any given juncture in his life, or what he had accomplished in terms of bettering himself. And so I don't want to do a timeline about his life, but I do want to point out that Malcolm X is an individual whose public life was really 12 years. And we count the last year or 11 months of his life, it comes close to 13 years that for a person who was in the Black freedom struggle, a person who was internationally renowned, he was so respected because of his analytical ability and his ability to synthesize information and come up with formulations, that this is an individual that coming out of the 20th century, we are still studying about him and revering his work in the area of the civic engagement and social justice, yet he was only a public figure for less than 13 years, and he was martyred prior to his 40th birthday. So it's a testimony to who this individual is and the love that we carry for him, his commitment to civic engagement and social justice. I have to just share this very quickly. You know, there is a saying, a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, the son of Abdul, peace be upon him, where he talks about how when Allah, the Most High, loves someone, he will announce to those in this heavenly host, to the Malaika, to the angels, that I love that individual. And then the angels will spread the word that Allah loves this person, so you should love him. And then that same love will come down to the earth. And I contend that why we love Malcolm so much, it starts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, when Malcolm was the national representative of the Nation of Islam from 1952 until March of 1964, a period during this period, that Malcolm was someone who could not express his personal opinions. He could share his opinions with those who were close to him. But because of being a member of an organization where the policy and the direction was established by someone else, that he was not able to formulate a coherent methodology or a coherent political philosophy of his own until he left the organization officially in March of 1964. And when we see that when he left the nation in 1964, to try to provide a quick context for this, we're talking about a time when the Congress, the senators, the congressmen of the United States were debating whether or not to pass a civil rights bill. And Malcolm was now in the process of freeing himself from the constraints that he was under with the Nation of Islam. And when he left in March, as we know, and I said, I'm not going to get into a timeline, but in April of 1964, Malcolm performed the Hajj. And this was a very transformational moment for him, that it influenced not only his religious perspective and views, but also his political ideas, though the ideas that had governed him up until this moment of understanding what a Muslim, what are the limitations, what are the areas of encouragement for our involvement in the society. So when Malcolm returned to the United States, we find that he spent only 4 months of his life in the United States during the last year of his life, and 7 months traveling overseas, getting an understanding of Islam and broadening his political perspective. When Malcolm came back, he was wearing a beard. And in an interview morning, I may keep it forever, I'm never, ever going to restrict and restrain myself, to put myself in a straitjacket so that I will not be able to change my ideas about anything, that I would not be able to organize as a result of being locked into a box. And he was making reference to this experience during the Nation of Islam. Malcolm went on to talk about and to explain, after returning from the Hajj and this throughout this 11-month period, that one of his objectives, whenever he was asked, are you now going to be involved in the traditional civil rights movement? Are you now going to be try to have influence on the electoral process? And Malcolm, speaking on behalf of the organization that he had founded, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, he responded in the affirmative that definitely we are going to try to get as many Black people registered to vote. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it without requesting or directing them to be a Democrat or to be a Republican. We want them to register. We want Black folks to register. Exert your influence at the ballot box, but don't tie yourself down to any one party, because it was Malcolm's understanding that all of the parties, these two major political parties that have dominated the political history of this nation almost from the beginning of the founding of this country, that Malcolm felt that there was something fundamentally wrong with the system, that the two parties were basically just two sides of the same coin, that their rhetoric may be different, but because of the system that they were functioning and operating in, that they had the same objectives. And Malcolm very articulately expressed how, because of this fundamental flaw, a flaw in the system, that it was based on white supremacy, and that we could not expect, I'm talking about African American people who were oppressed, or any oppressed people, as a result of the actions of the government of the United States and all its ancillary departments, the police, the military, and all of these different areas that make up the government structure, the infrastructure of this country. Malcolm felt that they were all tainted by this historical development from white supremacy, and that no matter what political party you were voting for, that unless and until we as individuals recognize that nobody is going to come and save us, that the saving of us, of course, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah commands and insists that we do for ourselves that which we can do, that we don't just wait for angels or someone to come and to free us or to liberate us. So this idea of Malcolm, of the formulation in the short period of 11 months, many of us believe that this saying that Malcolm began to attach at the end of many, if not most, of his presentations, he would say somewhere in there that change has to be brought about in this country by any means necessary. And this idea that Malcolm was putting forward was an idea that has long-term impact and effect by those of us who understand it and who try to emulate, to follow this mindset, this way of action. Malcolm, and if you allow me to speak so boldly, but I interpret, and others who were a part of the Organization of Afro-American Unity have interpreted Malcolm's understanding of this by any means necessary. It's not meaning that you just go and commit wanton acts, just indiscriminately hurt people, or you steal, you lie, you do these things. He was a very principled person because of his following, his commitment to Islam. Malcolm, by saying, if you would allow me to suggest this, was saying that no, we need to decriminalize acts which are in essence political responses to cultural, social, socio-political, and economic oppression. That this is something that that is not spoken about often as we try to look at what was Malcolm's political philosophy. We know his religious philosophy from the last 11 months of his life, but interpreting this political philosophy and saying that when people are oppressed, and when those mechanisms of government, as Malcolm has said, are either unwilling or unable to protect the rights, to defend people who were just being brutally taken advantage of by citizen vigilantes, by law enforcement, very similar to the conditions that we have today. Malcolm, by any means necessary, was suggesting that we need to decriminalize those acts that are done in response to cultural, socio-political, and economic oppression. And this is not just to decriminalize everything, but it's done with a mature understanding. Let me share just a few things, and my time will be up. Malcolm was consistently asked whether or not he sees progress. Has there been progress made by Black people in this country from the 50s, the 40s, up until he was asked this question in 1964 and all the way up to February 21st of 1965 when he was martyred? And Malcolm gave a very interesting response. And if you bear with me just for a moment, I've always loved this particular response. Malcolm said, when asked, do you think that things have changed by a number of people? Malcolm responded, our position, meaning the position of Black people in this country, has never changed. If you sit at the back of a plane going 100 miles an hour and you're in the back of the plane, well, it can start going 1,000 miles an hour. You'll be going much faster, but you're still in the back of the plane. We started out at the rear and we're still in the rear. Society is going faster, but we're still in the rear. Brothers and sisters, when we look at this example of Malcolm's just during this brief period, the kind of manhood and womanhood, the kind of forthright taking a stand for justice for African American people and for all oppressed people all around the world. It's interesting when we look at the example of Malcolm that this is an individual who was an internationalist, that Allah blessed him with the ability to travel with this, to synthesize, to so quickly be able to understand various political and social situations, not just in this country, but around the world. But Malcolm had a view that the people in the United States, Black folks, white, Latino, and everybody, in the 1960s had a very parochial, a very limited outlook or scope in trying to determine political philosophy and social philosophy. And so as a result of this, you find when you read what Malcolm was advocating throughout the developing world, that he was talking about, he was speaking in kind of a different political parlance. He was speaking differently than here in the States. He used a lot of metaphors in describing what needed to be done when he was here, because not that he was putting down American people, but he felt, and rightfully so, that we were not as aware and sophisticated politically as many folks are throughout the world. And so with Malcolm's example, as he talked about that the ballot itself is not going to be salvation. So look beyond just the electoral process. Be involved, register, and vote. But don't look at this system, this electoral system, as the saving grace, that is some kind of savior that's going to come in, personified through the electoral process to end and to stop the oppression. No, we have to work to change the structure, the foundation, the overall, what appears to be a mission, a kind of blood-sucking mission to take advantage through the capitalist system to victimize the majority of people who are living under this system for the benefit of a small minority of people. And so Malcolm, in acknowledging how corrupt things were, he spent so much of his time. And this is what I'm suggesting, that after the ballot today, that this country has just gone through a kind of cathartic electoral process, and getting rid of the joker who was almost contaminating the White House with his presence and the office of the presidents for the last 4 years. But don't think for a moment in the analysis that would come from a brother like El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, don't think for a moment that there'll be fundamental changes in the system because of the change of guard as to who will be the helmsman, who will be the captain of the good ship of America. It's going to take concerted and organized and consistent effort on the part of all of us to be involved in prison reform. There are those who are calling even for the abolition of prisons in this country. To be involved and understand that when issues like reparations for African American people become an issue like it has been brought back up, even in the 1970s, former Congressman John Conyers was attempting to introduce a bill into the House of Representatives about reparations for the descendants of enslaved people in this country. And now there's another bill that's before the Congress that's trying to make its way to a point of having a vote. That when there are issues of justice, and reparations is truly one of them, when there are issues of the horrendous conditions that those who have the misfortune of being incarcerated in this country, America, as we know, the largest incarcerated population in the entire world, a large percentage of those who are incarcerated are Muslims, yet our population, our numbers as far as the population of America are probably now approaching maybe 1%, yet we represent 10% of the population in the prisons. Malcolm pointed in the direction. Don't just minimize the avenues that we have to try to make a difference, to make a change. Recognize that we have, as we have tried to do with the Council for ICNA's Council for Social Justice, like we have tried to do with the Southeast Queens Initiative, like so many others are trying to do in an organized fashion to bring our resources, our intelligence, our abilities to bear, to go beyond the ballot box after we have voted. It doesn't stop there. The initiatives that we must take actually begins after we have discharged this responsibility of voting and carrying out this responsibility that we have as citizens in this country. And so I will close on this particular note. And I ask that you, if it's been very hard to glean anything from what I've said, just take with us, take with you the understanding that if we're especially looking through the prism of the work of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, then we recognize and understand that there is no silver bullet that we can have for the obliteration of busting up this system of white supremacy, the structural racism that has dominated this nation since its inception, that we have to go beyond and find those areas and avenues where we can be most effective individually, but more importantly, be most effective collectively.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid. You know, he spoke a lot about Malcolm X, and when Ossie Davis was doing his eulogy for Malcolm X back in 1965, which is is even in the Spike Lee film and just available online. He used words like Malcolm was our manhood. Malcolm was a gallant young champion. He was a shining prince. And I remember I asked one of our elders growing up in our local masjid who had the privilege of listening to Malcolm X live on occasion. And I asked him what that meant. And the brother said that what Ossie Davis was describing was that Malcolm X had two things. One, he had the vocal ability to speak what is on the mind of most African Americans. But the second thing was he had the courage. And as I listened to people like Imam Khalid Griggs and so many of our imams and leaders who are not afraid to speak the truth and who speak it so proudly and so eloquently, I kind of understand what that description meant of Malcolm X. But he mentioned a lot of great things in just a short amount of time. And as the brother had mentioned before, we actually have two powerhouse speakers. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our second keynote speaker, Imam Aiyub Abdul Baki of the Tawheed Center for Islamic Development. He is a writer, a lecturer, a poet, and a community activist. He's engaged in fighting for both domestic as well as international issues of social justice and human rights. And he is the former chairman of the Majlis Ashura Islamic Leadership Council of New York. So with that, I invite Imam Aiyub to share some words with us.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. نحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى سيد المجاهدين ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. By the grace and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm honored to be here. I didn't need to speak. I thank my brother, Dr. Khalid Griggs, did an excellent job of covering the whole subject, but I'm just going to take it to another point. We should be honored that Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahmatullah alayh, was Muslim. That is, when he used to speak, he used to say, Assalamu alaikum, and he used to speak and say to the people, I'm still a Muslim. That is to say, my religion is Islam. Allahu Akbar. Because many people thought that, he was moving away from Islam. No. In one of the articles I wrote a long time ago, Islamic Dimensions of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahmatullah alayh, if you take out the Quranic ayats and you take out the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everything that he said was significant and relevant, especially in that last year. When we talk about the saying the ballot or the bullet. In that last year, he was going through a great deal of turmoil and difficulties and hardships, trying to reconcile many things within himself. But he used to always say, my religion is Islam, reaffirming over and over again in his mind the importance of the Shahada. May Allah, fill his grave with nur, with light and sustenance, and make him among the great ones. Sheikh Mutahari, in his book on the martyrs, entitled, I think, Martyrs, he says that the martyrs are the ones who hold the most important part. They're like candles. They illuminate in the earth the moving out darkness and confusion, restoring light and mercy upon everyone. And because he codified what he was about in the form of a book, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, because he codified what he wanted in a book. Where you moving this? Okay. In the book, in the autobiography of Malcolm X, it will eternally be a testament to who he was, to what he said in his own words. In that article I wrote, the Islamic Dimensions of Malcolm X, you see that where the Prophet ﷺ says the best word that you speak is you speak a word directly to an oppressor and a tagut. And he was the man who spoke to the tagut, unfearful, undaunting, and standing straightforward, uncompromising, even at the risk of his life. And if you take that one quote that he said, the ballot or the bullet, we can only assess it in light of today's time. Had it not been for the ballot, Trump would still be in office. And it seems as if the people have gotten the point, because they came out in larger numbers. You never knew so many people who was registered to vote and stand on a progressive line and note to move America away from that which they want to move to. So we say, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. So now what's going to come next? Everybody wants to know what's going to come next after that momentous ballot. You have to be organized. And you can see in 4 years, you're going to have, most likely, you're going to have Trump running again and being engaged with the same party and same people. What will be their politics? What will be their end result? So we have to be first and foremost alert and aware, steadfast and consistent, that we stand upon a platform of truth, freedom, justice, and equality, and therefore we must stand against that type of stuff, because that stuff would get us into a situation where we will be engaged in civil strife, difficulties, hardships, and perhaps being engaged in some kind of wanton violence against each other. America needs to move forward. It needs to be engaged in a universal perspective on things. It needs to move away from the ideology of racism, discrimination, injustice, and move towards a more just democratic order. I'm not just saying, just the Republicans. I'm saying the Democrats too, because it's a question of tweedledee and tweedledee-dum. This is what Helen Keller said. Two sides of the same coin, and their politics is strange. So people have to mobilize, organize. They have to, be engaged and be involved. They have to keep their eyes open and look and see where this thing is really going. With all the bad weather you're having, and you have the changes in this and that, You don't want to give out money to the poor, to the needy, to the wayfarer. You don't want to spend time thinking about the lesser human beings, but you have to be engaged and watch which way this thing is going. Because the end result of all things, Allah knows best. But I think that we need to, not be sleeping. There's no time to be sleeping. Time to be watching, calculating, and in term still organize, still register people to vote, still know the issues, look at those progressive elements within the society and organize with them and redefine the reality. Let us, come together and see which way we want to go. I sure as don't want to be going along the same path that we're going now. 4 more years, same thing, Look like Biden is trying to break out of that ignorance, but you have to, unfortunately, have more progressive people engaged in this whole process of changing the reality of America and redefining America, not as it is, but as we hope it will be, a place where our children and grandchildren will be living with peace and justice and not have to be walking the streets and with some police officer putting their hand and their feet on their neck. They're talking about they can't breathe. That if a police officer kill an individual, that's not in his job description. He's a murderer, and he should go to jail. And the law needs to be changed that if you want him to kill somebody unjustly, that you're responsible for his life. So we see, moving right along, that Islam offers an alternative for the society to change. Al-Hajj Shari'a, rahmatullah alayhi, it made him a better man, and he did it in a short period of time. And those of you who are not Muslim, I would encourage you to read his autobiography if you haven't read it already, and look at that significant change. Once a street hustler, once a criminal, one of the criminal elements, he became a man of dignity and honor, worthy of worthy of respect, and as such, this is why he's being honored, because people are looking at him and saying, wow, he went through all of these particular things, he's seen all of these particular things, and he still strove and remained steadfast and true. And everything that he did was in alignment with Islam. And speaking truth, justice, calling a spade, and challenging people to be better than what they are stated as. This is why the young people, it is not the old people, it's the young people of today who are exalting his name and trying to emulate, be like, and so on and so forth. But the things that they should know is that he always said, you know, you can say Barry Ghani or Imhotep. He said, Assalamu alaikum, my religion is Islam. And Islam is what he died on. And then perhaps if people, he said one time, perhaps if you, embrace Islam or America study Islam, it would improve and solve its problems. But it can't keep going on without addressing the problem and knowing they got a problem and admitting they have a problem. Alhamdulillah. So you got to see for what it is and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we received the ballot and people came out in droves. But the people need to know, you know, that while you are contemplating and rejoicing, other people are trying to remove from you all rights and all privileges and all things. And alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Good. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Aiyub. So as we come towards the conclusion of this program, I just wanted to circle back and ask each of the speakers one question real quick, and then we can, inshallah, conclude. So first, I think if we can bring Imam Khalid Griggs back on, then one of the questions that's been coming up is that in regards of when we talk about the ballot and what happens after the ballot, many people concern themselves primarily with what's going on nationally, and obviously national lobbying and legislation is important, but a lot of times we underestimate the city level, the local level, the state level. So Imam Khalid, and in addition to answering this question, if you have any other remarks to make also, if you could touch on that, please.
Yeah. Brother Musab, that's a very good question. And I can't remember. I was trying to think who actually was credited with making this comment. But he said that all politics are local, and meaning that every that the work that needs to be done in the political arena starts on a local level. And you're very right in talking about how so often we look at upstream at the top of the ballot and don't pay any attention to the election of sheriffs, of judges, school superintendents, if they're actually voted on. In some districts they are. Just the people who have most direct impact on our lives on a day-to-day basis, county commissioners who are making decisions about allocation of funds and this kind of thing. So we have to pay attention and not just read about them in the news or just go to the ballot box to vote. We have to discern who has our interests in mind on a local level, and oftentimes we can have a greater impact on our local and regional levels than we can on the national level, because it takes so much money. An absurd amount of money to run for Congress and these other positions, and the further you go up the line. I want to just throw out one quick thing. I'm kind of a book freak, and I want to just make a recommendation of a couple of very good books. There's a book that was written, I can't remember now, it was I think it was in the early 90s, maybe as early as 1992 or something like that. And I would recommend that anyone who's interested in the religious life as a Muslim of Malcolm X read this book. It's called On the Side of My People. And it was written by a brother by the name of Louis DeCaro. It is an excellent book. I'm surprised that in all of the attention that's been given to Malcolm that it hasn't, come back up. But it's coming back up now. You should read that book, On the Side of My People, Louis DeCaro. And then there's a new biography that has recently come out, maybe I think it was this year in January, I think, with the name The Dead Are Arising. And it was written by award-winning journalist Les Payne and his daughter, Tamara Payne, I think is her name. Les Payne died in 2018. His daughter was a senior researcher for the book that took almost 30 years to come to fruition. This is an excellent account of Malcolm's life that you can get a lot of detailed information about his life beyond the autobiography. But get those two books, On the Side of My People and The Dead Are Arising.
And just a note to our listeners, whether you're listening or watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you comment on either of the streams, it will come up. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, you can post those in, and then we can have the speakers address those questions. Dr. Abdul Musa?
Assalamu alaikum. Forgive me. I did the same thing that Imam Khalid did. I forgot to unmute myself. But I do have a question. You spoke about him being in a straitjacket before he left the Nation of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know, do you think that the African Americans and the Muslim community are in a straitjacket regarding the political climate that we are in right now? And if so, what do we need to do about it?
So you're not supposed to invite people on your show and then put them on the spot like that, put them on the hot seat. But no, I don't mind being put on the hot seat. That's a very good question, Dr. Musa. We are, in my humble opinion, I think that we are almost, as a Muslim community in this country, and for some legitimate reasons and others, we've been playing Rip Van Winkle and sleeping for a long time unnecessarily. But I think that oftentimes as an ummah in this part of the world, it's like we just woke up. We've been asleep forever. And now when we wake up, we sometimes don't take the time to understand the social dynamics that have brought us to where we are right now. And sometimes we don't even understand the history of this country. And so it's like we've been in this deep slumber, for 50 years. Now we wake up and it's, okay, let me run to the ballot box, let me do this, without the requisite political education that we need to do. And also I think that oftentimes it has been my experience that those Muslims who were born in this country are the second generation young folks who are children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants, that because of our learned and lived experience, we have some insight into this land. And oftentimes I think that, our second generation, like our moderator here, Brother Musab, who is a brilliant political analyst, and alhamdulillah, so we should listen to people like Musab. We should listen to people like Dr. Musa, like Imam Aiyub, because and don't just be so dismissive. It's one thing to talk about Malcolm, but it's another thing to ignore all of those warning signs that Malcolm has given us to understand the American environment and American society. So I think how we get out of it by starting being intentional and making sure we try to understand to the best of our ability the social dynamics, the political dynamics, the religious dynamics of this country. It's important rather than just run out there and just think that, I can make a beeline to the ballot box. It's not like my parents and my grandparents who would get their head whipped, for trying to go and vote in even local elections. But my dad wasn't going for the whipping stuff. He wasn't wanted to turn the other cheek type dudes. So, but this was the environment. This was the climate. And, so we take advantage of this relative freedom that we have to vote in spite of all of the voter suppression that's going on. Take advantage of it, but vote intelligently, learn the land.
I actually had a question for Imam Aiyub. If you're there, then I thought it was very fitting that you began your talk by emphasizing the Islamic dedication of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, that he continued to emphasize that he was a Muslim. And you also talked about and touched on the current political climate in the United States. And for many young Muslims who are interested in civic engagement and who are getting politically involved, we tend to look at the status quo as it is, that you have the conservatives and then you have the liberals, and within the liberals you have the progressives. But as Muslims, many times we have relegated our Islam to our spiritual life, and then we step into the political arena and do whatever, and side with whatever we think is correct or incorrect. Can you, Imam Aiyub, try to advise, young Muslims who are getting involved on the role that Islam should have on our political mindset?
So I think that we need to be aware that Islam is a system, a way of life, and we should not be selfish with it. I think that's one of the reasons why Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahmatullah, used to say, I'm still a Muslim. That is to say, my religion is Islam. To remind himself and remind others who may hear him that his reality is defined by certain guidelines, certain ethical, certain moral principles. And if we adhere to these moral principles, we say we adhere to the Quran, we adhere to the Sunnah, we can never vote for Donald Trump. You can never vote for a man like that who say, Mexicans are rapists. And this is before he got elected. This is before he got elected. And when, of course, the things he said about immigrants, we know that he stopped Muslims, from coming to America for a while. And thank you for President Biden, for lifting that thing off our backs. So that's one thing. And another thing is that, as I said before, Helen Keller, who was a blind woman, and if a blind woman could see, that there's tweedledee and tweedledee dum between the Democrats and Republicans. They play a game. So if they're playing a game, you have to play a better game. And you have to come together and you have to talk and discuss, and have some discussions on these particular issues of the day that concern us in reality. Because they're not going to change the Second Amendment. That's a given. They're not going to, move in a concerted way without progress. So Frederick Douglass used to say, "There's no progress without struggle." There has to be a struggle, and if you're not personally engaged in a particular struggle, that's why it was good to see, that when George Floyd died, you got people all over the world was upset about it. They were mad about it. We should be mad about it too. Laws need to be changed. Laws need to be changed. I don't mean to wait until I'm dead to change it. I'm gonna change it myself if nobody else change it. Laws need to be changed. Do you young people know that you have Muslim political prisoners who are still locked up, 70, 60, going on 80 years old, and their condition is still the same. They have not been relieved. People who don't strive, for anything, they will not receive anything. You got to put this on your political agenda. These are the things I want to see changed. These are the things that need to be changed. And those people who are moving along those progressive individuals, line up with them, protest with them, interact with them, and hopefully, we'll see some better days. But the end results, have some discussion about it. And if it doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't benefit your community, then hey, mashallah ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Aiyub. I believe we have the brother might be backstage, so Ramiz, if he is, if you could bring him on. There's a brother from the New York Muslim United for Civic Engagement, brother Mir Ali. We were gonna ask him to share a few words about the organization and kind of what's going on. I think this is a good opportunity to bring a lot of the things that we've discussed together because we're talking about bringing everything together for concerted action that we can do. And I think this initiative is a great example of it. So, brother, please.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Mir Masum. I am with the Muslim United for Civic Engagement. It is a New York-based Muslim civic engagement organization. What Imam before me said is wonderful. What New York Muslim United for Civic Engagement believe that either you are in or you will be out. Either you are on the table or you will be in the menu. New York Muslim United for Civic Engagement believe that you have to engage in. You have to win the game to win the game. So New York has about 800 to 1.2 million Muslims. Regarding all colors, we believe if we can, all Muslims can unitedly engage, our rights will be given, inshallah. What Imam Aiyub just said, that they will not give it to us. We have to take it. And that's why our African American brothers and sisters sacrifice in 60s and 50s and 30s to get the rights. They have done their parts. Now we have to do our part to give the rights of Muslims and the minorities. We are proud. New York Muslim United for Civic Engagement is proud to sponsor this program. And New York 2021 will be the New York elections. We ask every Muslims in New York to be united and vote for right candidates who gives our right. Almost about 6 or 7 Muslims are running for city councils, inshallah. So this is the first time this number of Muslims are running. And Southeast Queens Muslim collectives, we are working together so we can be united and take our rights of the minority, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. It appears that we don't have any questions coming in on our chat. However, people are sending me questions on my on my phone that I had sent out invitations to. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions to the panelists, and I may even respond to some myself, and Allah knows best. Here's one to any one of the imams, and even you, Musab, if you care to respond to it. Given the current political climate, how can Muslims best interface with the community at large to counter voter suppression wherever it exists in America or around the world?
So I'll take a quick stab at that. I think, Brother Musa, it is important what you said, that we recognize that just because we become aware of issues, that there have been people who for decades have been working on these issues, been very diligent, like with voter suppression. And I want to point out the efforts that the Poor People's Campaign, under the leadership of Dr. William Barber, in North Carolina is one of those states that leads the nation with the most ridiculous voter suppression attempts than anywhere in the country. And having been involved with the Poor People's Campaign for a number of years, I've witnessed not just protesting at the state legislature, but going into federal court because of the efforts of the Poor People's Campaign to try to stop with these federal judges the attempt with these ridiculous voter suppression efforts. So I think that rather than think in any of these social justice issues that we have to just reinvent the wheel, let's survey the landscape and see who's already out there doing some work. And if they're doing good work, let's first see how we can join with others. Because the more we have these kinds of coalitions, the more effective our work is going to be. We don't have to go alone. It's not taking anything away from us if we're, as far as being identified with an issue, if we are not solely out there on these issues. So let's look around, see who else is involved. This voter suppression is something that harkens back to the 1940s, or the 50s, even before the Voters' Rights Act was passed in 1965. It's terrible stuff that's going on. It's a tremendous social justice issue that we as Muslims should be aware of and find ways to get involved in this.
Musab or Iman Aiyub, would you like to respond to it? We'd like to hear, since you're the youngster amongst us, Musab, I'd really like to hear some ideas coming from the younger generation.
Well, I just echo what Imam Khalid said, that many times, I think we saw it during the George Floyd protests for sure, specifically the Muslim community, but the overall community, a lot of people were awakened by it. And Imam Khalid did a webinar where he talked about, look, we know this, people who are not part of the demographic which suffer from things like what happened to George Floyd, I know Imam Khalid, for example, when he saw what happened to George Floyd, I'm sure he was devastated, but he was not surprised. But there was a great segment of the community which was surprised because they never thought it could happen. They never, even though it happened so often, we were at a time where we were on COVID lockdown, everyone's at home, and you're watching the TV, and this thing goes viral. And that definitely contributed to a lot of people then waking up, and we saw so many every Muslim organization in the United States did something about African American Muslims and social justice, and we saw just this rise of Muslims wanting to get involved in social justice and civic engagement. And so the point that Imam Khalid just made is that, look, when we get up to become involved in this, we can't circumvent the existing programs and movements and organizations that are already working on this. We have to go in and survey the field, who's already working on these issues, and let's join in. I think one of the most important lessons for young Muslims is the importance of a jama'ah, right? The importance of a collective, an organization. That's what every prophet of Allah, as we know from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the finest example. Is that it was a concerted effort together as an organization, as a movement. I think that's something that we need to be cognizant of. And when we go and work with groups like the Dr. William Barber's movement or any number of local non-Muslim movements also, I definitely think we should get involved, but we should know where we come from. As Imam Aiyub was saying, we should know that, just as Malcolm would say, I'm a Muslim. And we need to have that approach. I am a Muslim and I have these values.
Alhamdulillah, Rabbi Alameen, that's so very important. Our foundation is Islam. But however, we may have to reach across religious lines to join with like-thinking people to help us accomplish this mission. Now, yes, okay, George Floyd was a tragedy, but these are tragedies that have been going on throughout my life. Social media has exposed it. Mm-hmm. We as an organization of Muslims, must keep this effort ongoing. And we're not just talking about what happens after the ballot. We're talking about other things that exist, the poverty that exists, the injustices that exist, the political prisoners that exist, the people who are in prison because of their economic situation. The major disease in our country is poverty. As rich as this nation is, why are we still in this condition? I'm going to ask another question, and Imam Aiyub or someone here again. The analogy of the bullet in our beloved brother's speech was he implying that there would be violence ahead if we did not use the ballot? Now that the ballot is being used effectively by Black people, there's a presence of violence when Black people are peaceful. What lies ahead as parties and people are polarized, maybe now more than then?
We have to see things as it is. America is not going to change very easily. And this whole thing is a process of struggle. You got to agitate. What I think Al-Hakimi Shabazz rahmatullah meant about the bullet, clearly we can go and arm ourselves, but he never envisioned or encouraged violence himself. So therefore, in one sense, we're talking about self-defense. If someone attacks you, I think in another lecture he said something. He said Islam is not a religion that turns the other cheek. He said if somebody slapped you on one side of the face, he said send them to the cemetery. You know, but that should be a last resort. The first resort is, there's, as the young brother said, you got to be ready. You got to know the issues. You got to be challenging. You got to be forceful. You got to be aware of what happens and what your condition is. Because the ballot is going to come again. And the challenge for people is to come out in even greater numbers. You know, to get as many of them Democrats, not Democrats, Republicans out of office. But you gave me a hard question, Musa, and I'm gonna get you that for that.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. It wasn't a question that you could respond to. So I mean, I have deep faith in you. Yes, I mean, my brother, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep allowing you to share the knowledge that you have regarding Islam and about the social ills that affect our society. I don't know if you can see this, Musa, but there's a question from a sister, Sokna Bamba, regarding, I don't know if you want to ask it or put it forth, or you want me.
Go ahead.
Okay. Since voting machines connect to the internet and programmers can assign weight to multiply votes to favor which candidate they choose, as in the case of Dr. Shaw's diverted win, how to motivate folk? That's the question. And that's open to whomever would like to respond to it.
So I'm not absolutely sure I understand the intent of the question. I mean, do we motivate folks to pay more attention to the potential for corruption with these voting machines? I mean, that's been an issue that's has been raised for quite a while now, for a number of years, especially with the paperless balloting, where there's no paper trail, there's no way to verify that the information coming out of these voting machines is accurate or not. And again, it's not going, things like that aren't going to be changed unless we raise the issue. We have to turn up the heat. I mean, it's not going to change by our talking about it on this webinar. It's going to take organized, loud, collective action to make this an issue. Because even though people know what's going on, for the most part, or have some cursory kind of understanding what's going on, that it's not an issue, it's not a thing. And so we have to, part of social justice efforts is to make things like this a thing that cannot be avoided by those who are in a position to, legislatures and others in a position to change this stuff.
Shukran, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. I hope that answers your question, Sister Bamba. Here is one other question. We were coming towards an end. Was Malcolm addressing structural racism in his time, or was he focused on Black nationalism? And that's open to either Imam Khalid or Imam Aiyub.
If Imam Aiyub would allow, I'll just say just very, very short, something very short on it. Malcolm was definitely addressing structural racism. Once he left the Nation of Islam And as he, in his own words, said, he was no longer constrained in his analysis and what he could say. He, in a number of his presentations, actually said that if you notice, I'm no longer talking about Black nationalism. And so this, to me, was a product of his evolved understanding about Asabiyya and this kind of nationalism where you're putting yourself forward as a group of people, an evolved understanding, and the fact that now he could come up with his own analysis. So he was definitely addressing the issue of structural racism when he was pointing out that just voting is not going to change things because it's a system that's in place that's choking the life out of the people.
Imam Aiyub, would you want to respond to this?
You there?
Yes, we're waiting for you, brother, to respond. Well, all right. Assalamu alaikum. We, as we draw near to the end, I think that I personally, before I just hand over this moderating mic to my brother Musab, want to thank Imam Aiyub and Imam Khalid Griggs for this inspiring discourse or narrative that they gave on this topic. I'd like to say on behalf of SEQMC and the collaborating organizations that made this effort a reality, that we all have work to do that is listening to this program. There's those of you who may be listening who are not Muslim. I'd like to say to you, I think there's some scripture I remember from my little boy days, you understand me, that faith without action is not faith.
Right.
Therefore, we all have to join hands and work together in making changes in this country. And just as was said, the Democrats and the Republicans are just different sides of the same coin. If we look at, alhamdulillah, that we have a new president, because the other brother was just the shaitan manifesting itself in his, and I'm not saying him per se, but his actions were very shaitanic. Anytime that you take children away from their parents and put them in jails, anytime that you ban people from coming into this country based on their religion and the color of their skin, and if those of us in New York knew about him from years ago, we knew who he was. Many of my brothers and sisters who are on here were not aware. I'm asking you, the Imam Khalid gave you 2 books to read. I'm asking you to each and every month, if not every week, have a talk about what's happening in America and how we could change it in a unified effort to better the whole community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us the Khalifas. He gave us some commands for us to do as Muslims. Why are we not doing it? Why are we talking about we're corporations and we're not Muslims? There's a foundational approach that we must do. It is our commandment. If we say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, yes, we fall short in many, many ways, and I know that I do. However, we know that we have to do for our brothers and sisters in this creation, and that is the best way to worship our Rabb. By serving his creation. With that, let me get off my soapbox and give this back to Musab. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. I want to thank both the Imams as well as Dr. Abdul Musa, as well as everyone who tuned in and listened, and everyone who listens to this afterwards as a recording. Jazakallah khair. As always, ICNA Council for Social Justice, you can visit us at icnacsj.org. This is an organization that operates based on the generous contributions of the Muslim community, and so we ask you all to remember us in your dua as well as when you're donating. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.